Hello again, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. GamecockCentral.com presents Gamecock Central Radio with Kip Bouknight twice a week here on Gamecock Central Radio. We're coming to you live from the Gamecock Central studios, and I'm your host, Emerson Phillips. Kip, a strange weekend to talk about, a highly anticipated series between the Gamecocks and the Gators. Florida coming in ranked number 1 in the country in the Founders Park, with the Gamecocks ranked as high as number 2 in the nation. And, boy, the first 2 games were very exciting, a pair of one-run games, and then Sunday's Game 3 ends up being canceled. It was a scoreless game in the 4th inning on Sunday, and the skies opened up. We had rain all day in Columbia, and that game canceled, and it will not be made up. So give us your overall thoughts on the series, Kip.
Well, I mean, it was obviously a series of 2 powerhouses, and Florida comes in as probably one of the most talented teams I've ever seen in college baseball. So South Carolina certainly had their hands full, and looked to be in command and in control on Friday night, and things slipped away from them. That's something they're certainly not accustomed to have happening. But, one thing we've talked about on this show many a times this year is just how resilient this team is and what kind of character they have. And, having to battle back after losing a heartbreak, having a heartbreak of a loss on Friday night, to come back and do what they did on Saturday was just absolutely impressive. And, capped off by obviously Gene Combs' go-ahead home run, and I believe in the bottom of the 7th on Saturday night, and Tyler Johnson was just absolutely outstanding out of the bullpen, and it was a great win, and kind of crazy how things end up just being a split the series 1-1, but a very, very important win for South Carolina Saturday night.
No question, and it was a bizarre ball game. South Carolina scored first. They got a 2-out, 2-run home run by Alex Destino in the bottom of the 1st inning. Gamecocks led it 2-0 at the end of 1, and then in the 5th, freshman catcher Chris Cullen added a solo home run to make it 3-0 Gamecocks. In addition to the home run, Cullen also had 2 doubles on the night. So the Gamecocks had this 3-0 lead going into the 6th, but then Florida got a 2-out Gamecock error, and the Gators capitalized with a 2-run home run by J.J. Shorts, and they cut the lead to 3-2. So the Gamecocks got a little bit of insurance to make it 4-2. Florida would cut it to 4-3. That was the score going into the 9th. And you mentioned that Clark Schmidt was relieved by Tyler Johnson. He came on with 1 out in the 7th inning and retired 5 straight Florida hitters. So he finished the 7th, and then he got the Gamecocks through the 8th, and Carolina had this 1-run lead. It was 4-3 at that point, and Josh Reagan came on. Has been an outstanding closer all year. He had a chance to move into the SEC lead if he could save the Florida game on Friday night. And daggum, Kip, 2 Florida solo home runs in the top of the 9th inning by a couple of seldom used Florida players. That was the doggone thing about it. Horvath hit the game winner for Florida. He hit a deep home run to left, and he had only 3 at-bats in SEC play all season. And for Horvath, it was just his 3rd hit of the year. He was a .133 hitter. He was 2 for 15 until he hit that game-winning home run against the Gamecocks in Game 1 of the series on Friday night. So, Kip, the script couldn't have mapped out much better. The Gamecocks got good innings from the starting pitcher Clark Schmidt. Setup man Tyler Johnson got him to the 9th. And Josh Reagan came on. Coach Holbrooke said that they looked at the splits and the numbers added up, and they went with what they thought was the right decision. And Florida hit 2 home runs off of Josh Reagan and got away with a 5-4 win.
Yeah, it just didn't work out. That's the bottom line. I mean, you can overanalyze yourself to death on that. I mean, personally, I would have liked to see Tyler Johnson stay in. He was just pitching really, really well, and we've seen him do that in the past where they've kind of continued to use him. But you can't argue with bringing in Josh Reagan, your closer. I mean, he has been outstanding all year long. But the one concern I have had throughout the season is, a guy like Josh Reagan in a real tight game, when you don't have electric stuff, you have to be perfect. And, there was a couple pitches that you go, gosh, man, they really weren't that bad of pitches. But, when you're facing teams like Florida and facing some teams like South Carolina's going to face in the postseason, a guy like Josh Reagan, there's going to be very minimal room for error. So, having said that, after we saw what Tyler Johnson did on Friday and Saturday night against Florida, I don't know how you don't make a change, but they need to make it defined because I can't imagine what's going through Josh Reagan's head right now. He has been outstanding all year long for South Carolina. I do think there's still plenty of a place for him, and I do think that he could finish games, but I just think there's so many other places we could use him, and he could be well suited. I mean, he's a guy that I could see giving up 2 solo home runs and then throwing 7 or 8 shutout innings. I mean, he's just, I just see him as a starter, but it's kind of hard to argue with the 3-star pitchers we have right now. So it's kind of hard to find him in a spot in the rotation, but I do think he can be well used, and I think it could be a situation where they kind of match it up and go with the hot hand and go with Tyler Johnson, and if he's facing a bunch of righties and if there's a bunch of lefties, we could see a Josh Reagan. So, it just was one of those games. It was a outstanding college baseball game. I think if you're just a fan of college baseball and you watch Friday and Saturday night with Florida and South Carolina, you got what was advertised as a great battle of the Southeast, and it was awesome. It was 2 great, well-played games, and the crowd certainly came to life on Saturday. That was fun to watch.
This is Gamecock Central Radio with Kip Bouknight. I'm Emerson Phillips. You can download the Gamecock Central Radio app on the App Store and on Google Play. To subscribe to the podcast, search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, or other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. Kip, hard to figure anybody on the Gamecock baseball team got much good sleep on Friday night after losing the way that they did. 2 Florida solo home runs in the top of the ninth to steal that ball game, and that win for Florida extended their winning streak over the Gamecocks to 7 games. So South Carolina had to sleep on this all night before coming back for Saturday's Game 2, and Game 2 was another old-fashioned pitcher's duel. Florida got a solo home run in the top of the second inning to take a 1-0 lead, but then the Gamecocks came right back in the bottom of the second. Dom Thompson-Williams with a double, and he would score on a 2-out RBI single to center by freshman L.T. Tolbert. So the game was tied at 1, and it stayed that way until Gene Cone slapped a 2-out solo home run over the right field fence for what proved to be the winning margin. So here we go again, Kip. The Gamecocks going into the ninth with a 1-run lead. I don't think there were very many settled fans at that point. I think there were some nerves in the building, 8,000 plus at Founders Park. And this time, Tyler Johnson, who had pitched the 8th, stayed in for the 9th inning. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that because, I was curious to see if Reagan would come in. I thought that he probably would. But Johnson stayed in and got the final out in the 9th. He struck out Ryan Larson with a fastball. Florida had gotten a runner to third, so they had the tying run 90 feet away with 2 outs in the 9th. And then Johnson threw the heater past Ryan Larson to give the Gamecocks the win in Game 2.
Yeah, I tell you what, there's 2 things that really stick out for me there. The crowd on Saturday night was absolutely night and day better compared to what they were Friday night. Friday night I thought things, were kind of loud for Reagan in the 9th, but he gives up the solo home run to tie it up, then he gives up another one, and then you could hear a pin drop in the bottom of the 9th. And that's where, even when, your backs are against the wall, that's where we need that fan support. We need those folks to make it that true home field advantage. And they certainly did on Saturday night with Tyler Johnson going back out in the 9th. And I think Chad Holbrooke is going to have to do a very, very good job, as well as Jerry Myers, of trying to make sure that you keep the morale of a Josh Reagan where it needs to be, because in my opinion, they may say, oh, well, Tyler Johnson's not our closer, but if I'm in Josh Reagan's shoes, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, I've lost my job now, because it was a 1-run game. Yes, he blew a game, but last I checked, I don't think he's blown many games this year. He should have been in that ball game. Now, am I saying that I disagree with what Chad Holbrooke did in running Tyler Johnson back out in the 9th on Saturday? No. I've been wanting Tyler Johnson to be South Carolina's closer for the last 2 months. So I personally think a guy like Tyler Johnson should be our closer, only because he can still throw at 95, miss a spot, and still miss a bat. Josh Reagan, with all due respect, just does not have the electric stuff that you normally see in a closer. And he doesn't really have a secondary pitch that it can be dominating in a short burst. And what I mean by that is, does he have a plus changeup? Absolutely. But he does not have it's not that changeup has to be set up by throwing inside and outside and fastballs down on the way. And, there's so many things that come into a guy like Josh Reagan. A guy like Tyler Johnson come out like he did and throw 20 to 25 pitches and blow fastballs by you and be done. And so it remains to be seen what will happen. I do think that's a situation that needs to be handled very, very professionally and delicately. And, I do think Josh Reagan will handle it the right way because he's a great kid and he's a fine young man. And I wish him nothing but the best. And I still think there's major room for him to help this ball club out. But Tyler Johnson has to be your closer, in my opinion. He certainly deserves to be.
And without question, Kip, the Gamecocks need Josh Reagan. They're going to need him in some way, shape, or form. He's going to have to provide a role for this Gamecock baseball team if the Gamecocks are going to have any success in the postseason. So your best bet right now, or your best guess right now, Kip, how do things work out from here with the setup man closer situation?
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what I would do. I would absolutely go ahead and make the change. Boom, it's done. Tyler Johnson's our closer. Josh Reagan, we're going to find, hey, that doesn't mean you might not finish a game. Tyler may throw an inning on Friday and 2 innings on Saturday, and it may be a 3-run game on Sunday. And, hey, guess what? Josh Reagan comes in the 6th, and he might throw 6, 7, 8, 9. But I would absolutely sit both of them down and say, okay, Tyler Johnson, you're my closer. I wouldn't do the whole, closer by committee. We'll play matchups. That's not good. When a pitcher comes to the ballpark, he needs to know his role. He needs to know if he's coming in with a game on the line, 1-run game, who's in the game, period. Who's finishing that 9th inning. And I don't know if that'll happen. I hope it does. But I got a feeling that they're probably going to choose the closer by committee. I just got a feeling that's what I've seen that in the past, even under Ray Tanner's helm, and I just got a feeling that's probably what we're going to see. But I would definitely solidify a role because Josh Reagan definitely has a role, and it needs to be there. And in my opinion, it's we've got a young pitching staff. We've counted on them all year long. Those 3 starters, we can't count on them to pitch us through the 7th and 8th inning every single outing. So there's going to be plenty of times where maybe they get roughed up a little bit, and we need to bring in a guy like Josh Reagan in the 3rd or 4th inning to extend us, keep us in the game, and keep South Carolina with a chance to come back and win.
All right, Braden Webb pitched outstanding on Saturday, 7 1/3 for him, 5 hits, 1 run. It was allowed. He struck out 7 and walked 3, and that allowed Tyler Johnson to come in and record the final 5 outs and get this South Carolina win, a much-needed win. 2-1 the final in Game 2 on Saturday, and that snapped South Carolina's 7-game losing streak against Florida, and it put South Carolina a game in front of the Gators in the SEC standings heading into what we thought would be Sunday's Game 3. And that game, Kip, was started. They played into the 4th inning of a scoreless ball game, but then it rained. We had lightning in Columbia. There was hail at some point, and the rain stopped but then came back, so we ended up with a lengthy delay, and eventually the decision was made after several hours to go ahead and cancel the ball game. So this game will not be made up, and it does not count in the standings, obviously, for either club. So it looks like South Carolina and Florida are going to have one less SEC game on the record when the final season comes to an end here in a few weeks. So, obviously that one game could end up being a difference between who wins the SEC and who doesn't.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know if I can remember this really happening. I'm sure it probably has, but, hopefully it ends up not being a tie. Hopefully South Carolina's a game better than Florida in the standings. And, I think we saw a preview of 2 teams that definitely, I would say, have a very good chance to get to Omaha this year. I truly believe that. I said that about 6 weeks ago in the South Carolina team, and it's really, yes, they're talented, and yes, I think they can. They've got to get the bats going. They've got to get hot at the right time. But the big thing is just the moxie of this team. This team wills themselves to victories. They're very resilient. After losing against number 1 team in the nation, Florida, in your own home, and a devastating loss on Friday night, to come back and do what they did and not back down just says a lot about, in my opinion, it says a lot about who they are as people, who they are as competitors, and again, that starts from the top and Chad Holbrooke, and certainly it's very, very contagious, and it's fun to watch these guys play.
Really interesting series with Florida. Ends up in a tie of all things with Game 3 rained out, and it will not be made up. So we'll move on, Kip. We've got midweek baseball this week for South Carolina. They'll take on USC Upstate on Wednesday of this week. That will be a home game. It'll be at Founders Park, 7 o'clock first pitch for the Gamecocks against USC Upstate. And then as we look ahead to next weekend, Kip, the Gamecocks are on the road in the conference at Kentucky Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 6:30 Friday, 6:30 Saturday, 3 p.m. Sunday. And Kentucky's been ranked in the top 20 in the country all year, but they've lost 2 of 3 in each of their last 3 SEC series against Auburn, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. So Kentucky's been tough for a very long time, and they need a series win to get their season back on track.
Yeah, they do. I mean, that's a matchup with Kentucky. Seems like South Carolina's always struggled at times against. I mean, I certainly know we did when I played them, and it can be a tough team. They're very scrappy, and they always seem to have some power arms. But you know, South Carolina's just got to continue to play one game at a time and not get ahead of themselves, because it is a long season, and you know, I think got exams this coming up week, and you know, they're going to have to do their due diligence to just make sure they stay focused and play one game at a time and not get too high or not get too low. And again, we saw them do that this weekend against Florida. That was an outstanding, you know, weekend of baseball. Very, very good college baseball to watch.
All right, Florida will play at Tennessee this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And, of course, Vanderbilt not very far behind the Gamecocks and the Gators in the SEC East standings. So we still got a lot of work to do. But, Kip, all in all, I got to believe it's a very positive feeling in the Gamecock locker room right now, losing the way they did Friday night, but then bouncing back, having the moxie to come back and win Game 2 in a very strong way.
Yeah, I do. I think the locker room should be very, very pleased with this weekend. And I think that, you know, again, I do think that, you know, it's going to be very, very important how the coaching staff handles this situation, because it is a situation. You know, that they can try to say it's not, but you know, it's just it is what it is. I mean, you know, it's in the back of their mind, I'm sure they probably were thinking the same thing. But it's hard not to run a guy like Josh Reagan out there because he's had so much success. I mean, he's been outstanding. I mean, the kid hadn't even given up a run for I don't know how many innings in his first, you know, part of the year. So. I just think it was the inevitable for me. So, you know, we'll see where they move forward from that. But, you know, it's a good problem to have. You got 2 great pitchers, and, you know, they both need to be huge integral parts of the rest of the season for the pitching staff for South Carolina.
How will Chad Holbrooke pull the strings and push the buttons with the bullpen? Will the Gamecocks be able to win the SEC? Will South Carolina get a top 8 national seed? All these questions and more will be answered in the next few weeks. And it's Gamecock great Kip Bouknight joining us twice a week to talk about it here on Gamecock Central Radio. Kip, we appreciate your time. Safe travels this week, my man.
Thank you, Emerson. Go Gamecocks.
All right, he's Kip Bouknight, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and we thank you for joining us here on Gamecock Central Radio. Have a great week.